The cost of minimum wage hikes. 19 states, including Colorado, California, Connecticut, increasing their minimum wages at the start of the new year. And our next guest warns more cities may do the same in a Wall Street Journal op-ed called "The Fight for 15." Coming to a city hall near you. Let's bring in Michael Saltsman, Employment Policies Institute Research Director. Michael, I've said this all along. Once a few of the cities started passing that $15 minimum wage, it was San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York City, that was going to become kind of the standard for the left. What is it doing to restaurants in those places where we've seen it so far?
Well, what it's doing is creating a tremendous amount of hardship, and it's actually leaving quite a bit of carnage in its wake. We see now over 30 cities and municipalities have their own local minimum wage requirements. Some in California as high as $13 an hour right now. You compare that to the historical minimum wage standard of about $7.40. So it's quite high, and what we're seeing is customers aren't necessarily willing to pay for it. Even in wealthier markets, like in the Bay Area, where I think people assumed that a higher minimum wage was more palatable. At the end of the year, some newspapers have described it as a death march. There have been so many restaurant closures out there. And so I think what some business owners are able to do is adapt and do things like automate. But for other business owners, especially the smaller guys, what it means is that their business model just doesn't work anymore. I know in some in some places that the restaurants have done away with tipping. And because the tips don't count toward the minimum that's required by the local legislation or the local law. So they've really, and so that people who work in restaurants who are servers, they don't want to work in places where they can't earn tips. That's right. I think we've seen from some news stories this past year that when restaurants do eliminate tipping, servers more than anyone tend to revolt because they lose quite a bit of income. There was a recent story, actually, a nationally renowned restaurant in San Francisco closed after 5 years. And the owner went through the numbers and said in 2012, before taxes, he was earning about an 8.5% profit margin. By 2015, he was earning 1.5%. That's what happens when you raise the minimum wage dramatically, especially in an environment with no tip credit. And again, if customers don't pay for that, either the business owner's got to find another way to adapt by reducing staffing levels, or they have got to close. Why? Answer this. The Fight for 15 campaign that we've seen, a lot of the protests, it's funded by unions. Unions are funneling money to this. Union workers, if they unionize, theoretically would get paid more than the minimum wage. So why then are the unions behind it? Because it gives them negotiating leverage with these large chains, potentially. If you have a $15 minimum wage, the unions get a waiver, and then they can go to a McDonald's and say, hey, you unionize, we'll get you lower than 15. What's behind all of this? You know, there are a couple of reasons. You're right that for some unions it is self-interested. In the past, especially the hotel unions have used that tactic. For some unions, you know, who, let's say, represent janitorial services, they may have members who actually receive a raise. But for other unions, they view this as a new source of dues-paying members. I mean, private sector union membership is down at or near historic lows, and so they view the push for a $15 minimum wage as a means to create value. Right. Michael, thank you for being here. Michael is Saltsman. Terrific to see you. Please come back.